Okay, Chag Sameach, Moadim L'Simcha. We are talking today about our casino's kosher. And I'm not referring to the cuisine. We're referring to gambling here, and we do know that I'm not familiar with the culture of the casinos here in the United States, but I do know that where I come from in Melbourne, gambling is huge. In fact, there's a horse race called the Melbourne Cup, which is a national holiday. Everything is, banks are closed, schools are closed, everything closes in Melbourne for the Melbourne Cup to horse race. There are free trams to the horse race, to the racetrack. It's like unbelievable, it's a huge thing. There's a casino in Melbourne called the Crown Casino, which is probably one of the largest properties. Melbourne's a city of 6 million people approximately, so it's a large city. This is one of the biggest properties in the city. It's a gambling casino, I do know that there are a fair amount of Jews who go there, a fair amount of Jews who are ostensibly frum who go there. And is it appropriate? Is it correct? Is it not correct? So there's a few issues. Just as an introduction, there's a fascinating Gemara which says, Gemara in Chulin, which says that regarding Yaakov, who stays over on the other side of the river in order to retrieve some property. And the Gemara says what he was retrieving was some relatively minor pakim, katanim, like little jugs. He's got some little jugs. The other side, he says, so he puts himself in danger, going over the other side of this river in order to retrieve some really apparently insignificant property. And the Gemara says, Kol kach lama, why? Why would he do such a thing? And the Gemara says, because for the righteous, their property is more important to them than their body. Chaviv aleihem mamonam, their money is more dear to them, migufan, than their body. That's an astounding statement. I mean, if you would imagine, conjure up an image of a Rosha, an evil guy, conjure up an image of a tzaddik, any tzaddik you want in your mind, okay? And you say, this tzaddik loves his money. Loves it. Rav Kanievsky loves his money. He loves it more than his body. If I would introduce Rav Chaim Kanievsky, I'd be pelted with esrogim, right? If you would introduce, right? If the Yated would write an article about some tzaddik and say how his money is beloved by him. He loves his money. I don't know. Right? And I think of, let's say, I'm not saying he's a Rosha. I don't know him at all. But I think of Donald Trump. I don't think he, on the other hand, he loves his body much more than his money, as opposed to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who loves his money much more than his body. What? So the Gemara goes on to say, why? She'ein poshtim yedehem begezel. Because the righteous does not stretch out his hand and steal. So here's the definition. A righteous person is someone who he loves his money more than his body, and the reason he loves his money is because he doesn't steal. I think here again, if I'd like to introduce Rabbi so-and-so, ladies and gentlemen, he does not steal. Now, the truth is, nowadays, that may be, okay, whatever, maybe that's a chiddush, I don't know. But again, right, but to introduce a tzaddik as someone who does not steal, that's what the Gemara is saying, he doesn't steal. So I heard from my teacher, Moshe Shapiro, the following, and he says, you have to read careful reading. Careful reading is, it doesn't say they don't steal. It says, Ein poshtin yedehem begezel. They don't stretch out their hands and steal. That's like an interesting, right? It doesn't say they don't steal. It just says, they don't stretch out their hands and steal. So he understood it the following way. So there's two, when you talk about something as being, I talk about something as being mine, there are two ways of understanding that. I say, this watch is mine. Why? Because I control it. It's in my possession, it's in my property, it's mine. If I say, this hand is mine, is that because it's in my property? It's in my possession, I have a contract? No, it's because it is part of me. So mine can either mean something which is part of me, or it can mean something which I control. Okay? So he says, something that comes into your possession through honest labour, through exertion, through using your intellectual or physical skills, and you have put yourself into it, and you have earned that money by putting yourself into it. Like it says in the Torah, you should pay your worker on time. Why? Ki elav hu noise es nafsho. For to it, for that wage, he gives his life. Why? Because a piece of time is a piece of his life. He's giving his life for it. The Gemara says he puts his life at risk for that. He goes up onto the roof to repair a roof. He fixes the electric panel. Right? He deals with an infectious disease. He deals with he deals with tax season. Whatever it is, right, this guy is putting his life at risk, and so therefore, he's giving his very life. So how could you deny him his salary? How could you deny him his salary? So you see, if that's how you earn your living, if every single cent you've got is yours because you invested yourself in acquiring it through honest work, labour. Doesn't have to be, you don't have to be sweating, right? But you did what you have to do. And he says, then that's mine because in the same way my hand is mine. It's not just mine because I control it. If I manage to wrest control of property from you, either I stole it, right, or I convinced you to sell it when you were not really interested, what we call lo sachmod, right, or whatever it happens to be, then that property is mine. Why? Because I control it. So he says a righteous person, ain postin yadayim, they don't stretch their hands out. He goes, in other words, what he means is they don't possess anything which is not theirs because it's part of them. If they possess something, it's them in that. Yaakov worked hard. I was going to say worked like a dog. It's inappropriate for Yaakov, but I mean worked hard for Lavan, his father-in-law, for years and years and years. Right? It's amazing. Right? People say that's also right. Right? You see that Lavan was a Rosha, an Oved Avodah Zorah, idolatrous pagan. So and his son-in-law was working for him for those. So in order not to follow the ways of the pagans, we have the father-in-law work for the son-in-law. The other we try to do the opposite of Lavan. Right? It's like, right. Anyway, so it's a minhag. It's not to be followed hukas ha'akum chalila. So anyway, but he worked hard for it. That means, as far as Yaakov is concerned, everything he's got, even if it's pachim katanim, these little jugs, they're his not because he won them in a bet, not because he managed to convince you to sell to him for much less than it should be, not because he managed to swindle anyone out of it, only because he worked, he invested his time, he invested his life, he invested in himself, and therefore they're his in the same way that the hand is his. So chaviv aleim mamoinam yosem begufan, their money is dear to them because the tzaddik knows. The tzaddik can sleep at night knowing that everything he or she owns is theirs because it's part of them. So that's an important, just as a general hashkafic Weltanschauung introduction to the subject of gaining money through gambling. I think we have to take that into account. It's not a halachic, this is not a halachic statement I'm just making. I'm not talking about halacha, prohibited or permitted. I'm talking about a general worldview. And that's also important. We don't only, we try to follow not just the law, but also the spirit of the law. I always mention, sometimes people follow only the law, not the spirit of the law. My son was telling me so there he's down in the Gaza area, so his combat goggles, right? You wear goggles in combat, protect your eyes from stuff, right? So his combat goggles were very scratched and scarred. He could barely see through them. So he goes to the guy who's in charge of the stores in the army base, called the Afsanai, hated by everyone. So he's a jobnik, he's hate, despised, whatever. Anyway, so he goes to this guy and he says, I need to replace the goggles, I can't see through them. The guy says, Lo shvurim, lo machlifim. The rule is, they're not broken, we don't change them. My son says, you're right, they're not broken, but I can't see through them. We're shooting at people, it's good to see, right? It's worth it, right? So he says, Lo shvurim, lo machlifim. That's the rule. Forget the spirit of the law. So my son says, okay. So he takes the goggles, goes around the corner, puts them on the ground, stomps on them with it, right, army boots, crushes them to a million, but picks up the shards, brings it back, he says, here. He says, oh, okay, now I can switch them. Shvurim machlivim, they're broken, now I'll switch them. So instead of this idiot getting a pair of goggles, which they could now polish and actually renew and save some money, instead, right, my son's got to break them in order to get new goggles. It's unbelievable, right? But it's an example where someone's thinking the spirit of the law is irrelevant. It's only the letter of the law. Right? So here, even though I'm going to be talking about the letter of the law when we discuss gambling, casinos, etc., I felt it is pertinent to discuss also this idea of the spirit of the law, of how money comes into our possession. How it comes into our possession. And that's an important point. And according to, the Mishnah says in Kiddushin, Chayav Adam Lalamed es b'no umnes nakia v'kala, you're obligated to teach your child a clean and easy trade. By clean, it means clean of illicit activities, and easy in the sense that it does not occupy your mind 24/7, 365. You're able to come home and you're able to learn Daf Yomi, you're able to talk to your wife and children, etc., and you're not always going through your head like the numbers or anything else like that. Shmona Esra, the famous story, there was Jews often managed the estates of wealthy Polish landlords, wealthy Polish lords. So as a Jew after Shmona Esra, he runs over, it was like the end of the season, he runs over to the Rebbe, Kotzker Rebbe I think it was, his Rebbe, he says, my life is in danger. He said, why? He says, just now during Shmona Esra, I realized I'd made a huge mistake in the calculation of this Poritz, the local lord, huge mistake, and I lost him like 20,000 zlotys. So he will kill me, he'll kill me. So the Kotzker Rebbe says, don't worry, it'll be fine. He says, how does the Rebbe know? He says, because the Poritz doesn't daven Shmona Esra, he'll never figure it out. You'll be okay. So, again, but again, one of the ideas, teaching your son a trade, is not merely a survival skill. You don't need the Mishnah to tell you that. That's type of obvious, although to many it's not. But it should be obvious that, of course, you need to learn how are you going to survive. Right? But it's telling you more than that. It was telling you is the way that God designed this world is effort. Put in effort. In other words, the whole idea of Bechira, of free will, is to avoid the idea of getting a handout. Right? Now, the whole reason there is a physical world at all, according to Rabbi Yosef Karo, is because to avoid Nahama de Kisufa, bread of shame. That's true on the spiritual level, so that translates also into physical world. So that's the idea, again, as an introduction, and of course, I think it is important to point out as well the famous words of the Ramban, Nachmanides, in his beginning words in Parshas Kedoshim, where the Torah gives a general mitzvah, Kedoshim Tihu, you shall be holy. And the Ramban says, in a lot of discussion, what exactly is that mitzvah? What does it mean, be holy? How are you holy? So the Ramban understands it. He says the Torah gives you commandments. This is kosher, this is not kosher. Right? It tells you this type of relationship is permitted, this relationship is forbidden, and so on and so forth. But the Torah does not tell you how much it's appropriate to eat, which is actually good for us here, right? But the Torah doesn't tell you that, right? But it doesn't tell you, for example, it doesn't give you that type of detail, because that's left up to the individual, because it could be different for different individuals. So, but he says the Torah tells you this mitzvah of you shall be holy, so that every time you have a question, there should be really two dialogue boxes in the flow chart. One is this permitted, is it not? So if it's not permitted, don't do it. If it's permitted, now we go to the next dialogue box. What's the next dialogue box? Is it holy? That's a different thing, right? That's not a question, right? It's a different dialogue box. Your flow chart has to include that. So in the flow chart, say, is it holy? So it could be that it's permitted, but maybe it's not holy, right? It could be that no one is getting hurt. Great, excellent, but is it appropriate? It could be that, and so on and so forth. I think we should apply that, and there's no reason not to apply that to the casino and to the whole gambling situation as well. So now let me get to some of the halachic issues. Of course, the earliest mention of gambling in halachic literature is a Mishnah. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin talks about those who are not valid as witnesses for reasons of sin. There are many reasons that people cannot be a witness in a court. But one of the reasons is a category of people who are disqualified because of their sins. These are people who've done some type of prohibition for the sake of money. And therefore, it's very possible, the logic of this is very simple, if they're prepared to do this for the sake of money, they'll probably perjure themselves for the sake of money as well. Okay, so they're disqualified. So the categories are, the first category is Hamasachek Bekuvya, one who plays with dice. Literally, plays with dice. The commentaries explain it refers to these cubes that people throw, and whoever gets the number that is, it's basically playing dice, right? That's one of the prohibited or disqualified witnesses. The second one, malve baribis, one who lends money with interest, which is, as we know, prohibited. Mafriche yonim, and people who, there's two explanations of this. Some say mafriche yonim means someone who steals pigeons. People put pigeons in coops, pigeon coops, right? Coops, whatever it is, right? And some people will, even though you don't really own the pigeon in that sense, because it's not, it's free to fly wherever it wants, but certainly we know people who regularly keep pigeons, they've got their pigeons, so if I steal them. But the other explanation of mafriche yonim are pigeon racers. But, people do actually, pigeon racing still exists, right? And the pigeons, the homing pigeons, they race which one will get there, and you bet on it. So those are disqualified. But it's interesting that the Mishnah goes on to say, quotes the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, in which Rabbi Yehuda says that which the gambler is disqualified is only if that's his only source of income. If he has other sources of income, but he also dabbles in gambling, then he is not disqualified. So the Gemara discusses the idea here, and there obviously is a fundamental difference of opinion as to the nature of gambling. Because you see, if gambling is considered theft, okay, we make a bet, we play dice, I get the money, I win. If that's considered actual theft, then what difference does it make if that's my only profession, right? It doesn't make sense, right? Yes, I am, I do this profession, I'm a rabbi, but on the side, I also gamble. In other words, steal. What? That doesn't make sense. So obviously, if you say that if that's your only profession, or that's your income is from gambling, your prime income is from gambling, that means you must hold that gambling is in and of itself not actual theft. And the Gemara says the reason the gambler will be disqualified is a very interesting statement. It says because Eina osek bi yeshuva shel olam. That means he's not engaged in the Yeshuvah shel olam. Yeshuvah shel olam means making the world a habitable place. He's not engaged in building the world. Yeshuvah shel olam, it's like, for instance, the term Yishuv Eretz Yisrael doesn't only mean settling in Israel, it means building Israel into a habitable place. So Yeshuvah shel olam doesn't mean he's not living in the world. We're all living in the world, right? Most of us, I guess, it was like, who was that? Steve Wright. It was Steve Wright. He said he got a postcard from a friend that had a picture of the entire planet Earth, and it said underneath, "Wish you were here." So I know people like that, but again, Yeshuvah Shalom means not just dwelling, but it means he's not engaged in building the world. So by engaging in gambling, that's his main source of income. He owns a casino, he's automatically, even if you say that gambling is not theft, you are nevertheless disqualified because you're not engaged in something which is productive. It's not a productive thing. For other poskim, there are other halachic authorities who actually would maintain that, for example, an arms dealer may be disqualified for the same reason. Right? There's a discussion about that because the state of Israel has a huge arms trade. There it may be different, certainly is different, because the state of Israel needs an arms trade in order to survive. If we're relying on the United States, France, England, Germany, then we wouldn't be here now. Okay, so we have to have an arms trade. But nevertheless, it's Yeshuvah Shalom. The other opinion, which disqualifies the gambler, even if he does have another profession, even if he does have another source of income, assumes that gambling is a form of theft. It's a form of theft, rabbinically. Right, classic theft, as Rashi says, Vayigzol et hachanit miyad hamitzri. He grabbed the spear from the hand of the Egyptian. Vayigzol, that's classic theft. I walk over to you, I grab it from you. Okay, classic theft. Geneva, I sneak into your property, I take it away. Those are the classic biblical thefts. But there can be other things which we call avak, a dust of theft, or midrabanan, rabbinic theft, which are on a little bit of a different, more subtle level. So what's the nature of theft that could be involved in gambling? So the Gemara says, it's what we call, in order for me to acquire something halachically, I must do what's called an act of acquisition, kinyan. Now the kinyan requires that the person selling, transferring to me the property, has to have what we call gemirat da'at. Gemirat da'at means he has to be completely committed to this. And I'm getting the thing, I'm obviously completely committed, right? But the guy who's giving it away has got to be completely committed. and the basic central idea of any kinyan, any acquisition in Jewish law, right, when we went there last week, we went to the local rabbi and said, I would like to sell my chametz. Okay, so the rabbi, what did the rabbi do? Did something weird, right? He gives you a pen or a handkerchief, hopefully clean, and he says, okay, lift this up. So you lift it up and you say, I'm acquiring this through this acquisition. I'm making you my shliach. I'm making you my agent. In other words, there has to be an act which formalizes the agreement, an act in which I am completely committed to giving over my McAllen, my Glenlivet, the whole works, everything to the rabbi. It makes me nervous, right? But knowing he's not going to drink it on Pesach. It's Wayne that bothers me, the guy he sold it to. Anyway, but you give it to, but there's a Gemiras Das. It has to be done with an absolute Gemiras Das. That's the idea is, and that's the central focus of a kinyan. Now, what about a kinyan where I'm giving you something, but I do it in a way, I don't think it's really going to happen. I don't think it's really going to happen. Meaning, huh? Well, I know it's going to happen. I know that I've given it to him.
You know it's not happening.
No. There, the kinyan I know is happening. Whether Wayne will decide to come into my house, get the key from my neighbours, the Merkins, come into my basement and get the chocolate or whatever it is, that I don't know, but that's irrelevant, right? I'm giving, if he does that, I'm okay with it. Right? Here, I'm talking about where even the kinyan itself is unclear. You understand? That's a distinction. It's a stage before Wayne coming into my house. Right? The stage here is that I say, I'll bet you that I have, I'll bet you that lunch they're going to have some type of potato starch macaroni substitute mixed with some, I don't even want to go into that, but whatever, right? So, and I said, I bet you that's, and you say you're willing to put some money down. They say, yeah, $50 tells me, $50 says they're going to have the macaroni substitute for lunch. Now, the reason I am willing to possibly to wager that money is because I'm very confident that I will win. It could be that you are just as confident that you will win. Why? Because you spoke to the maitre d' and said, oh, are we having macaroni? I'm sorry, not today. Only things you can actually see what they're made of, right? So now we both, so whoever wins, when I give you the money, when I made the kinyan, we shook on it. We made the kinyan. That's called kinyan asmachta, meaning what's asmachta means? It's doubt. It's not clear. I'm relying on something which I think will happen, and when it doesn't happen, I am not giving over the money, so to speak, with what's called complete da'at, complete Gemiras Das, complete commitment to it. So it's a little shaky. Okay, so when you get the money, when I lose that bet, and you get that money, when I'm giving you that, so to speak, there's a certain level at which the receiving of that money, it's not theft, you haven't stolen it from me. I'm definitely giving it to you willingly from most perspectives. You say, I handed over, bet's a bet, we shook on it, end of story. However, when we made the original kinyan, which is the shaking of hands, or whatever it happens to be, there was a reluctance on my part, or there was a confidence that it would not happen. And therefore, can you really call that Gemiras Das? Can you really call that a complete commitment to the transfer? So whether or not you can call that complete commitment to the transfer, that is apparent. That seems to be an argument in the Gemara. Is asmachta a kinyan or not? The Gemara has other examples. If a guy says, takes land from someone, as a sharecropper, they used to give land to people, instead of actually paying rent for the land, what I'd do is I'd say that, say to the landlord, whatever crops I harvest in this year, you get 10%. That'll be the rent, and I get the rest. Standard format, called sharecropping, right? Or an aris in Hebrew, okay? So now, the guy looks at me and he says, you look a little lazy to me, Becher. I said, listen, I'm telling you, if the field's fallow this year, I'm going to give you $10,000. Huge amount of money. I said, if the field's fallow, I'll give you oivir, right? If I leave it fallow, I'm going to give you $10,000. Now, am I obligated to give it to him at that point? What would you say? So here, the Gemara, it's a Gemara in Bava Metzia, right? And the Gemara in Bava Metzia says that I'm not obligated to give it to him. Why? It's called an asmachta, meaning I was so confident. Let's say some disaster, Sandy, hits the field. There's no way I can plant that field. Right? Or something else happens, I don't plant the field. Do I have to give him the 10,000? You see, no, because when I made that statement, what was I doing? I was exaggerating. I was making some extravagant claim to convince you to lease the field to me, knowing full well that it's totally within my hands. It's within my hands to, the Gemara says, it is within my hands to plant the field or not to plant the field. I could leave it fallow, I could not. So now, here the commentaries, Rashi primarily, Tosfos, there is some argument and discussion whether they agree with Rashi or not. Eventually it seems that Rabbeinu Tam retracted from his initial objection to his Zayda and agrees with Rashi in Sefer HaYoshar. But basically what Rashi says, he just says this: when I gamble with dice, he says, there it is not in my hands. There it's something where it's completely out of my control. When it's completely out of my control, completely, because it's pure randomness, the roulette wheel, etc. I have no control. The, whatever those things are called, the slot machine, right, slot machine, out of my control. There's no way you can, I don't think so at least, that you can jiggle the dial or anything. It's pure random, it's supposed to be random, right? So, magic words. Yeah, people do incantations and stuff. We're going to talk about that in another class, right? We talk about alternative therapies, right? So anyway, talking about complete randomness. Anyway, so when you are doing that, right? So when I put the money in the machine, is there a knowledge? Is there a complete giving over of that money? There is, because I have no what we call havamina. I have no illusions that it's in my hands to do this, right? I hope that I'll win, and people who do this sit there hoping all day that they will win. I had never been to a casino, but I was in Las Vegas. I was in Las Vegas for one Sunday. Gave 6 shiurim. Did not see. It was like unbelievable. So I saw slot machines at the airport. Right? There's people sitting there like waiting for the planes. Amazing, right? So there, Rashi would say that is not asmachta. Why is it not asmachta? Meaning that because since I know it's not in my hands, there's no skill involved. Therefore, it's not the same as my saying, I'll plant the field, don't worry, if I don't plant it, $10,000. Because there, I already know that I'll plant it. Okay, or it's in my pants to do it. So they say there, so this is actually interesting. It's a major argument how actually we paskin. How do we rule in this particular argument? What is considered is an asmachta, kinyan asmachta? Is it like an acquisition in which it's shaky, in which it's dependent upon what will happen or not? How do we rule regarding that? So if you look in Tosfos, in a couple of places, and there's also found in other sources, Rambam discusses this as well, but he doesn't put it the same as Tosfos. But if you look at Tosfos, Tosfos says, he gives 3 instances. He says, the instance, and this is also, by the way, how the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, who is the Ashkenazi authority in his glosses on the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Moshe Isserles of Krakow rules in accordance with Tosfos. And he basically says that there are 3 categories of what we call gambling or betting. He says one of them is where it's not in your hand at all. It is completely dependent upon others, or is completely dependent upon something which is absolutely random. He says 2 things. If it's dependent upon others, but it's not completely random, it's not in my hands, it's dependent upon others, he says there, we would say it's not a good kinyan, not a good acquisition. Because there, since it's not in my hand and it's not completely random, it's in the hands of a third party, who knows what will happen. So therefore, I'm not always certain about that. He says, in a case where it's just completely, it's not in anyone's hands, it's not in my hand, and not in anyone else's hands, it's completely random, like a lottery, like the roulette wheel, like, I understand there are certain card games where skill is involved, right? Poker, is there skill involved? It's not pure random chance, is it? I have no idea, okay. No one's willing to say they actually know, but that's alright, right? So,
convince ourselves there's skill.
I'm sorry?
Convince ourselves there's skill.
Well, is it really? I have no idea how it works. There is some level of skill. The skill of keeping a straight face, right? A poker face. Can you sit there and do this, right, etc. Right? There is some skill involved in that. There's probably skill also in estimating chances and probabilities, right? There's some mathematical skill involved in that. You also have to be able to smoke and drink a tremendous amount in short amounts of time, I believe. Sit for ages in one spot, right? There's certain athletic ability as well that's involved, right? So, there was actually a call to make an Olympic sport. There were actually, the Poker Association wants to make Olympic... Wrestling, that's not an Olympic sport anymore. Not athletic enough. Right? What? Right. Poker, okay, I don't understand. Okay. Right. Yeah. Anyway. Don't get me started on the Olympics. So the second category, we would say that is indeed a kinyan. That's actually a good kinyan. That's not theft. Why not? Since it's not dependent upon my skill or anyone else's skill, it's purely random, the roulette wheel type thing. So in such a situation, therefore, when I give over the money, when I place the bet, so to speak, it's completely given with a knowledge, gemiras das, meaning it's over. That's it, I'm giving the money. If I win, that's awesome. But I can't control that. Category 3 is where it is, it's in my hands to a certain degree, but it's a great exaggeration to believe it would be. I greatly exaggerate. So when, let's say I tell you, if I don't do this, I'll give you $1 million, there, right, what happens, because I'm so confident that I'll do it, and it is in my hands, but however the exaggeration is so great, that may constitute, I could have a claim in court, listen, are you crazy? I don't have $1 million. So he'll say, you offered me that, I was exaggerating. Right, in other words, when I do that, it's not really gemiras das, okay? So how do we conclude in this matter is a major argument between two... I'm sorry, what? I can't hear you. What?
The third case would be the oris?
The third case would be an oris, but where the oris gives an unreasonable offer. The sharecropper says, I'll give you millions, right? I'll give you... right, it's that... Okay. So now, now one of those, just before I even get to the halachic conclusion, I think it's interesting to read, I think it's important to read to you a quote from one of the Rishonim, who actually agrees that the kinyan asmachta is not theft. This is the Rivash. There's a Rishon, one of the Rishonim from the time of Tosfos, and he says the following. Where is it? I shouldn't have removed the staples. This is interesting because this is one of the opinions that it's actually permitted. It's not theft. But the one who says it's not theft, he nevertheless says the following. Oh, here we go. Bevadai, this is a Rivash in a tshuva. He is again from the time of Tosfos, from about 13th century. He says, Leika asmachta bekuvya, when you gamble, it's not an asmachta, meaning if it's not an asmachta, it is indeed a good kinyan, it's a good acquisition, in which case it's not theft. Mikol makom, nevertheless, even though I've told you it's not theft, bevadai shu davar mechuar, it is certainly an ugly matter, umetuav, and despicable, umeshukatz, and disgusting. V'rabim chalalim hipil, it has caused many casualties. V'atzumim kol harugav, and there are a vast amount of corpses out there as a result of gambling. So what's fascinating here is, this is coming from the lenient opinion. Right? This is the Rivash. The Rivash agrees, right, with Tosfos that indeed it's not it's not theft. But that's what he says. Now, it's interesting. Now, Tosfos does add one more thing, and this is important as well. Tosfos adds, towards the end of the Tosfos, he actually adds that all that I've said, which is that it's a good kinyan, is only if the money is placed on the board at the outset of the game. Everyone puts their money in the pot, right? We put, how much is it to join this game? $20. Everyone puts in the $20. See, because at that time, since everyone's putting in the money, and I'm putting in the money as well, that means we've all done a kinyan. I've given it over the money with complete and total, about that $20 as far as I can say, is done. Right, if I win, that's great, but the $20 is done, it's over. So such a situation, right, Tosfos says that would be okay. Because there you've already done the kinyan. No one is reluctant in giving that $20. Everyone gives that $20 with a full and complete kinyan. Now, as I said, whether or not this is permitted, how do we rule in this particular case, is an argument between Rabbi Yosef Karo and the Ramah Rav Moshe Isserles. As I said to you, the Rav Moshe Isserles, who's the great Ashkenazi authority, he is lenient. He is lenient. He follows the view of recorded in the Balei Tosfos, and he says if it's something which is beyond your control, it's a random game of chance, he says it is permitted. He does say what Tosfos says, that you have to put the money down ahead of time to make it completely permitted, but he says even when you don't do that, it appears to be that the common custom is to be lenient even in such a situation. And he says that's okay. It is interesting that Rabbi Yosef Karo was against it. Rabbi Yosef Karo rules against it in a couple of places. One interesting place is Shulchan Aruch, where Rabbi Yosef Karo rules against gambling, is in Hilchos Shabbos. He says if the Baal Abayis, the guy sitting there, he says he wants all the people in the house, everyone, he's got I guess his large extended families at his table. He doesn't want there to be jealousy about who's getting the bigger portion. Like today, we don't, thank God, we're, I guess, affluent enough that we don't have these type of issues. You know, everyone takes, right? But when you had a very limited, so everyone would get a certain portion. I was actually at someone's house in Israel when I was a Becher in Yeshiva, 1979, right, early medieval, and this guy, right, we came to this guy's house, and his wife brought the food on a large platter, which she put next to him. And then he looks at each person, looks you up and down, and then puts stuff on your plate and decides how much. Like, he's like, look at me, look. Yeah, all right, you don't need that much. And he goes, right, this is how he did it. Right? Everyone, I guess that was not uncommon in older times. So the Shulchan Aruch says, let's say the man here decides he's going to distribute portions through a lottery system. Draw straws or whatever it is, and you'll decide who gets the bigger portion, who gets the smaller portion. That way no one can have any objections or any complaints to this guy. It's fair, it's done random way. So are you allowed to do this? So Rabbi Yosef Karo, in the Code of Jewish Law, Rabbi Yosef Karo says if the portions are different sizes, it is prohibited to do this. He says not only is it prohibited to do this on Shabbat, because on Shabbat you're not supposed to do mekach umemkar, you're not allowed to engage in commerce on Shabbos. However, he says even during the week you cannot do that. You know why? It's gambling. So the person who gets the portions, he says it's given out, it's not allowed, you're not allowed to do that. It's kinyan asmachta. So the Rabbi Yosef Karo, very stringent about this, and he says even when the money is on the board, even when it's not dependent upon your skill, it's purely random, he still says that it's actually kinyan asmachta, and he says it is a avak gezel midrabanan, and this is the opinion of the Rambam, Maimonides as well, and as usual, Rabbi Yosef Karo follows the opinion of the Ramah, but the Sfardim, as the Poskim say, L'chu el Yosef, Asher Melachem Tasu, go to Joseph, what he tells you should do. So the Sfardim go to Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, and they follow his opinion. Ashkenazim, on the other hand, Bnei Yisrael Yotzim b'Yad Ramah, we come out with the Yad Ramah, the hand of the Ramah, and we follow the opinion of the Ramah that it's actually permissible in a case where it's not an exaggeration, and a case where it's not within your control. In the case where it is within your control, like a game which is not pure chance, poker for example, there the Ramah would require that we put the money in, that we are gambling as a kinyan ahead of time in order to do that. Again, I'm sorry? No is correct. No one allows you to do it as your full-time job. Yes. Everyone agrees, because there, because it's certainly not Yeshuva Shalom. Now, Rabbi Vadi Yosef was asked whether Sfardim can participate in Mif'al Hapayis. That's the national lottery in Israel. So there, you buy a ticket for 10 shekel, and you could win whatever it is, 3 million shekels, like any lottery. Okay, so Rabbi Vadi Yosef says, for Sfardim it is prohibited, for Ashkenazim it is permitted. So he says Sfardim cannot do this. He says, he says there are 3 problems. He says problem number 1, he says it is gambling. And the Rabbi Yosef Karo forbids gambling. He says problem number 2, it goes to the general coffers of the government, and it's used for all types of illicit things. He says we can't be responsible for that. He says because, like, we pay taxes, and taxes go to things that we're not happy about, right? Wherever you live, I'm sure the government is doing things which are against Jewish law, right? Generally. So, but what can you do? He says, but here we have a choice. Taxes I have to pay. Here I have a choice, right? And he says, third, certainly if it comes to betting on games, like soccer games, which in Israel, unfortunately, are played on Shabbos, and there are Jews involved, so there's Chilul Shabbos. He says, obviously, gambling on these things is prohibited because that is supporting Chilul Shabbos. Yeah?
So, sorry, would not be able to play in Chinese auction? That sounds like you put money in beforehand, and then they draw...
According to Rabbi Yosef, that would not be permitted. Correct. Now, that's Rabbi Yosef's opinion. And he says Ashkenazim would be allowed, but Sephardim not. Interesting, there is a tshuva by Rav Moshe Sternbuch. Rav Moshe Sternbuch in Tshuvas Van Haggis, who addresses Rabbi Yosef's tshuva, and he argues on Rabbi Yosef's ruling for Sephardim. And he says he doesn't understand. He says because, he says, in the case of buying a lottery ticket, he distinguishes between that and classic gambling. Why? He says, if you give $1 for your lottery ticket. He says, when you give that $1, you have purchased it 100%. In fact, forget the prize. You've now purchased something of value. A lottery ticket is valuable. You could sell a lottery ticket. I remember there was Pennsylvania. There was once a while back, Pennsylvania had was $400 million. It was some huge amount, the Pennsylvania lottery. You could only buy it in Pennsylvania. So I know a guy from New York, a Jew. He went down to Pennsylvania. He bought 1,000 tickets for $1 each. He comes back to New York. He sells 1,000 tickets for $100 each, right? He won the lottery. I mean, he didn't win the lottery, but you know what? It didn't matter to him. Win the lottery, don't win the lottery. I'm good, right? So a lottery ticket is worth something. It's valuable. A lottery ticket is valuable. So Rav Moshe Sternbuch says, I don't understand, there's no kinyan asmachta here. What you bought has value whether you win or not, because this is something you can sell to someone else, right? So like in Australia, there's a store in Melbourne called Glick's Bakery. Famous bakery run by a guy called Mr. Glick, who is a Holocaust survivor. He's in his 90s. He still works in the store. He's got 8 branches throughout Australia. It's the most popular bagel store in Australia amongst Jews and non-Jews alike. Right? You get in there, you pull out a number. Fridays, it's horrific. It's terrible, right? There's the lines are unbelievable. And everyone is praying. People are trying to calculate the number and praying that you don't get served by Mr. Glick. You know, I would pay someone to get a different number, because Mr. Glick, he's a fantastic man. He's a tzaddik. He's a wonderful man. He's 90 years old. He's slow, mate. What do you want? A bagel. So it takes him 10 minutes to walk from here to there, right? He finds about 10 minutes walk. You're there for half an hour if you get served by Mr. Glick, right? Which means the number are behind me, so I shouldn't get served by Mr. Glick. I will sell to someone. You know, so I'll buy from someone, right? I'll give you $1. Just here, you get served by him, right? So he's a wonderful guy. I just don't want to be served by him because I want to actually get home for Shabbos, right? So the Tshuvas Van Haggis, Rav Moshe Sternbuch argues, and it makes a lot of sense, that since this is sold to people and it has value independent of whether you win or not, he feels even for Sephardim this would be okay. So Rav Moshe Sternbuch maintains even Sephardim may buy a lottery ticket. He also points out there's a view in the Gemara that when it comes to Hegdesh, asmachta does work. In other words, we're more lenient about giving stuff to holy things than we are to profane matters. Which means, if I made a bet with a kohen in the temple, and I say, I bet you I'll do this, and if not, I'll give you this, it could be that would work, right? Because there's a few reasons, but one reason is wherever it is, it belongs to God. So, and you basically give it back to Him. But he says, if the lottery is for the sake of a yeshiva, a kollel, a tzedakah, etc., he says that's like Hegdesh, and hence we may even be lenient there, but even according to the Beis Yosef. But he does add, he says, another point is, another distinction between a lottery and a poker game, let's say. He says, in a lottery, I'm not in competition with anyone specific. He says, the kinyan asmachta, one of the reasons I'm not really willing to give it over is because you and I are in competition. We made the bet, we're in the game, so it's personal, right? So he quotes Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, used to point out that it was incredible. He says, a butcher would come to him with an animal worth 200 kopecks or whatever it was, 200 zlotys. He looks at the animal, he says, it's treif. Not kosher. The butcher accepts it. He sells it to the non-Jews. Okay, fine. It's the halacha, the halacha. He goes back. He says, the same butcher comes to him a month later, and he's got a business dispute with someone else for about 1/10 of the amount, and Reb Chaim Paskins rules in favour of the other guy. The guy's screaming and yelling, and he's saying, you know what you're talking about, you call yourself a rabbi. He's like going out of his mind. Right? What do you mean? He says, I paskin that the animal was treif a week ago, and you lost 10 times the amount you're losing now. And yet you're ready to accept that. But he says, when it's against the other guy, no. So Rav Sternbuch, quoting this from Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, he says, I understand that you're more reluctant in the case of a poker game, or in case of a wager, etc., than you would be in the case of a lottery, because in the lottery there's nothing personal. There's no personal reaction. What I'm up against 300 million Americans, 320 million Americans, however many people buy the lottery. He says, therefore, he would rule that it's okay to do such a thing. The Sefer Hasidim, while not on a halachic level, but the Sefer Hasidim says something very interesting about gambling. So he says the following. Sefer Hasidim, we're talking about Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, one of the Rishonim from the medieval period. We're talking about 12th century, 13th century Germany. He was what's called one of the founder of the Hasidei Ashkenaz, the German pietist movement, and he is the author of a very famous book, Sefer Hasidim, as well as a poem that we all know, probably, that he wrote, Anim Zmirois. Singer there, Anim Zmirois, right? That was written by a man who was a brilliant Kabbalist and a great philosopher and scholar, and one of the founders of the pietist movement in Germany. So Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, in his book, says the following. Al yirachem odom al achzarim. You should not have pity on those who are cruel. We know that, right? That's the Gemara says, one who has mercy on the cruel will in the end be cruel to the merciful. But he adds to the Gemara, Al yirachem al mishaena merachem al asma. You could not have pity on someone who doesn't have pity on themselves. That's also a little bit in the Gemara, because it says, merachem al mishaen boy das. You don't have mercy on someone who exhibits no das. They're not merciful on themselves. Al yirachem al mishu kafui tova. Someone who's an ingrate. Don't have, okay. V'al yirachem al mishaena merachem al asma. Don't have pity on someone who doesn't have pity on himself. Kagon. For instance, what would be a case of a guy who doesn't have pity on himself? Mefazer ma'ois shalol tzorech. He spends money without reason. He's a spendthrift. What I have to, you know? Ve'ena nishmak shiyotzin oso. He doesn't listen to people. People say, listen, there's no such thing as a risk-free investment. If this guy's claiming it, he's very likely this is not a good idea. You're not going to get 99% return guaranteed, right, in 30 days, right? Chances are this is not going to happen, right? So as the Satmar Rebbe once put it, the only chazorah return you're going to get from this is machzor al psachim. Is the guy who actually goes around to the door, snoring. Okay. Va'al yirachem, and don't have mercy, al mishu mesachek bekuvya. You should not have mercy on someone who's a gambler. Va'omer, and says, Tirachem alai, please have mercy on me. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be humiliated. Right, so-and-so won this money from me. I need to pay him back. Please, right? He says, better that he should be humiliated, better that he should lose the money, and certainly, hopefully, learn from that not to engage in these type of practices. So it's interesting. Yehuda Chassid takes a very harsh view. I remember I was driving down to give a shiur in I forgot where it is. It's where that it's on the Jersey Shore, near Atlantic City. There's a small Jewish community, huh? Margate, where the elephant is. Right. Okay. So I'm driving out to Margate. I stop at a rest area. There. A guy comes over to me. I don't know if he was Jewish or not. He didn't look necessarily Jewish. Comes over, he says, can you spare $5? And I say, well, what? At a rest area on the turn, like it was very straight. He said, I lost all my money in Atlantic City. I said, what do you mean you lost it? You lost your wallet? He said, no, gambling. I said, are you crazy? I'm going to give you $5. He lost his money. He needs money to get home, right? Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says, it's like the guy, it's like the guy hurt himself, right? I don't have to. So again, those are some of the opinions. So just to recap very briefly, we have the question you have to ask: permitted. Now I have to ask: is it holy? That's the Ramban. Number two: how do we earn money? The idea is that tzaddik loves his money. Why does he love his money? Because he knows that every cent he has is not gained through control, but it is gained through honest investment of self in something. We also have the view in the Mishnah that gambling is, according to everyone, if that's your whole profession, it's not oskim b'yeshuvo shel olam. You're not engaged in making the world more habitable. You're not engaged in improving of the world. Right? Then we have an argument, both argument of the Tanaim and Amoraim, and there's an argument of Amoraim if it is an argument of the Tanaim, right? And there's an argument of Rabbi Yosef Karo and Rabbi Moshe Islos whether gambling in the sense of a kinyan asmachta, when you've done something which is not based on skill based but is rather random, is that considered to be an actual kinyan or not a kinyan? And I did forget to point out that there is a view that even something which halachically is not a kinyan, if the law of the land enforces it as a kinyan, that might be sufficient to make it an acquisition. I should have mentioned that. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein has that opinion. He says, for example, halachically speaking, why? The logic is very simple. Since the whole idea of what makes something a kinyan or not is the degree of certainty of the thing going through, the degree of certainty of my mind, he says, let's say halacha says, this is not a kinyan. However, the government says it is. Is it going to go through or not? Done right. The police and the courts will enforce it. So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein uses that example in a case of a will. Because according to Jewish law, if a person wills money to someone, right, generally in the will, a kinyan cannot take effect after death. Not possible. The person's got to be alive to do the act of acquisition. So a classic will and last testament, which takes place after the person dies, doesn't work according to Jewish law. Doesn't work. So Rav Moshe Feinstein says, well, he says, yeah, true, it doesn't work according to Jewish law, but in America it works. He says, why? Because the probate court and the lawyers and the police will enforce it. So he says, even though Jewish law says it doesn't work, it'll work here because there's a certainty of it happening based on the courts. So the same could be said, even if we'd say that gambling is not a kinyan, right? It could be that this doesn't, of course, affect all the moral issues that I've mentioned, but it may affect, whether it's a kinyan or not, and whether it's considered to be theft. And then, so we had the argument from Yosef Kar and Rav Moshe Islos, and we had the caveat that Rav Moshe Islos adds from Tosfos that you have to have the money down, ideally, in order to make if it's a game of skill, something like that. If you put the money down, then indeed it's considered a kinyan at the very beginning. We have then the opinion of Rabbi Yosef that a Sephardi, and he's quite stringent here, cannot even participate in a lottery. We have the opinion, whereas an Ashkenazi is able to do so, assuming that it's not something supporting something illicit or illegal or a chilul Shabbos or something like that. And then we have the opinion of Rav Moshe Sternbuch that disagreeing with Rabbi Yosef and saying that in fact a Sephardi is able to participate in a lottery, but not in other types of where it gets personal between two people, but in a general lottery they are allowed to do that. He also suggests that even for the Sephardim it could be, if the lottery is for tzedakah, then it's okay. Not because we're just being lenient, it's tzedakah so it's okay, right? But rather because tzedakah is like hegdesh, giving something to the temple. In such situations, we are sometimes more lenient about the type of kinyan. And then finally, we have the Rivash, who I want to mention again. The Rivash, one of the Chachmei Tosfos of Ashkenaz from very early, who comes along and says that even though it is permitted, it is meshukatz metuav, and Rabim Chalalim Hipila, many casualties. I don't have to tell you that there is an addiction, gambling addiction, and that's something which is of great concern. And there are groups that actually help people with gambling addictions, and it's a serious. That's not something I went into, and finally the Sefer Chasidim's very harsh statement about not having mercy on the person who throws away his money in gambling. So again, what you're going to do on Saturday night, you should ask your local Orthodox rabbi if you have the guts, right? And or whatever you feel like. I'm not paskening here. I just wanted to present various sides of the issue and some of the sources upon which the discussions are based. So hopefully we'll be more enlightened about the issue. Thank you very much. Good morning.